If you're not familiar with the terms cocktail wine, human terroir, utilitarian wines, or if you've ever wondered why there are no ingredient labels on wine bottles, then today's episode is for you. Hi, friends. My name is Sarah. I'm a certified sommelier and host of the Wine CEO podcast show. And this week, I am sitting down with Sam Barron. Sam is co-winemaker at Complant Wines. He works with his dad at this incredible micro winery coming out of Napa Valley. And Sam and Daniel are really shaking things up in the world of Napa wines. They are dedicated to the terroir of the region and really championing Napa Valley. Instead of sticking to some of the more classical styles that have been coming out of Napa, they are really paving the way to make sure they are showcasing the unique terroir and making the most of the grape varieties that they are committed to expressing in their winery. I can tell you these wines are phenomenal, and I had such a fun conversation with Sam. He's such a cool dude. He was literally throwing down pottery while we were chatting. So if you're listening right now to this podcast episode, hit pause and head over to my YouTube channel so you can watch the video, because let me tell you, this interview was so fun because you're hearing Sam talk about winemaking while watching him make beautiful clay pottery as well. So definitely the first time I've ever had an interview like that, and it was such a fun one. So let's dive into my conversation with Sam Barron from Complant Wine. Podcast listeners, I'm so excited because I have to say this is the first time ever I've interviewed someone who's throwing pottery while we're chatting. So I have a really cool guest host today. I have Sam Barron, and Sam is part of a father-son duo at Complant Wine. And Complant Winery is an amazing winery that is really focused on celebrating the art and craft of wine, specifically focusing on Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay in Napa. Between Daniel and Sam, they have an incredible amount of history making wines all over the globe. And so I'm just excited for this conversation. We're going to have a really, really fun time. So Sam, welcome to the Wine CEO podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah, and welcome to anybody who's watching. Welcome to the Mud Gallery. This is the my ceramic studio I built from the ground up about 2 years ago. So yeah, welcome in. There's a bunch of, if you got the tour, there's a bunch of random art everywhere. So it's how we do it. Try and keep the art moving, you know. Sarah, what have you done?
So
What have you done for yourself today? I'm going to hijack this conversation already.
I love this. What have I done? Well, I worked today. So I work in my day job in technology.
Yeah.
So I'm an HR manager. But you know, I woke up and I went for a really good run, which was awesome. It's a great way to start the day.
That's good
And
self-care.
yeah, later tonight, I'm celebrating a friend's dinners for their birthday. So
Heck
I
yeah.
love
That's good
cooking. I'm
self-care.
cooking pasta. Yeah, it's gonna be a good night.
Cool. Love it.
How about
All
you?
right. I got home from my like annual. So once we press off our last tank at the winery, like I'm always waiting for that first real rain. And I got back from my annual porcini foraging trip, and I have porcinis dehydrating. We had an amazing dinner last night. The porcinis were popping like up north, so yeah, just like processing porcinis. And I got my daughter out for the first time to like come mushroom foraging. She's like two and 3 months, and so she did awesome. She picked some chanterelles all on her own, and we got like a crazy haul of porcini. So
I
it
love
is
it.
all good. Yeah, so I'm in a
Does
very
she
good head state.
does she eat the mushrooms too?
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, we
Oh,
ate tons of chanterelles over the weekend, and then porcini are the only thing you can eat raw. You said you're a chef, so you probably know that. So like we did porcini crudo last night. She was super into it. I mean, and the photos of her, I mean, these porcinis are like, king porcinis, king bowl eats off the coast. So it's like I love that. It's like one of the beauties of being in the wine industry, right? You get to live with the seasons, and it's like built in to your cycle, and so it's like for me, it's almost always I'll press that last tank, and then it starts to rain, and it's like, cool, now I get this 4 day weekend. I've been working every day and working like crazy and run around and like get to transition from one craft to a different craft, right? And have this different relationship with nature. But it's always like so giving, right? And porcinis are so ethereal because they only pop once a year on the North Coast. So it's like timing it right. When you get it right and you just like kicking over these massive porcinis, there's nothing like it. It's a good gift from nature after forcing us to work so hard to make beautiful wine.
Yeah, I love it. That's like
Yeah.
perfect timing. End of the season,
Yeah.
harvest mushrooms. I've never heard anyone be so excited to harvest some porcini mushrooms. So, I love it.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best. Yeah, I've been like trying to work these spots out for a while, and they really popped this year in a way that like was just amazing. So the pines were going off, and the kids had a
Yeah.
blast. So
Sounds
yeah,
like
away
fun.
we go.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was
Okay,
super
well, now
cool.
I'm adding mushroom hunting onto my bucket list of something I need to do before I die because it sounds pretty fun.
Oh, it's the best. And it's super safe. You just go with somebody who knows, and there's nothing like that. Like you go out, you harvest special mushrooms and make pasta and like hang out by a wood fire, drink some good wine. It was a great trip. It was real like battery charging, cup filling trip. So
Love it.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Bing
Okay,
bang
well, we're
boom.
getting off topic from the wine, which I'm totally cool with.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But between harvesting for mushrooms and you're throwing down pottery, I love it. Tell us about winemaking. How did you get into wine?
So I am super lucky that my dad is in the industry. So I kind of like I grew up with wine essentially. Like I was at Dominus with my dad when I was, I don't know, two, three, four, five. Like there are all these pictures of me. Like I'm the only person who has photos of him at five naked swimming in crushed macro bins of Dominus. So I've been around so I've been around wine a long time. And like the beauty of like living it, I think, is a different perspective. I think every like the beauty of wine and any craft is that like there's room for different opinions and perspectives. But I came to it from like a really craft focus on the product, like celebrate obsession. And my dad's an obsessive and I'm an obsessive, and we're always trying to get better at any craft. And craft, you need mentorship, and like I've just always had mentorship from my father. And my first jobs were working in vineyards and working in wineries and working in vineyards, working at restaurants, working at wineries, doing like all this kind of like vineyard related activity for the most part, not as much like the winemaking. And so I was really lucky that I always wanted to be somewhere and have that full, work somewhere small enough where you can really oversee everything. I think a lot of what happens in the industry now is that you get really specialized as these places get bigger and bigger. You have to get specialized. And so, I've worked at larger places where, like, if you're on the winemaking team, you never step foot in the vineyard, right? You receive the grapes and then you process them. And I think that's a relationship. Those people are probably better at receiving and processing grapes than I am, right? Because they're so focused on it. But it's different. I want to have that relationship where I'm living with nature and like being a part of that cycle. And I think that like giving the vineyards power and not dominating them so much with the human decisions can really let the vineyard shine through. And it's just the relationship that like my dad and I want to have with the vineyards at Complant as Napa and wine in general gets more and more like what I would say human, right? I think about wines on a scale of like there's the difference, like you go from being the unknown craftsman to like making a wine that's completely defined by your decisions, right? And there's always going to be this balance within wine, right? Because like God wants grapes to turn into vinegar, right? Like it's controlled spoilage no matter how you cut it. So like if there's no intervention at all, we're always going to have vinegar, right? And so there's going to be that human input, but I think there are ways to let the vineyard shine a little more. Smaller wine, like smaller blends, more like single vineyard focused wines, less massive blends from massive, like larger and larger regions, which is its own art form and an art form that I love and I think is really cool as well. But I think like for me, the most important thing is that relationship with nature and kind of like having a healthy relationship with nature. I'm lucky that I get to do that. And then just like obsessing about fermentations and obsessing about taste and vineyard and knowing the right vineyards and knowing the right farming practices so that we can be a little more hands off with the winemaking. So yeah, I'm lucky. I grew up with it, and craft is like has always been a huge part of my life, and like it has always been celebrated by my family because we're so in it, which I think I remember like because I have 2 degrees, one's from Reno and one's from Davis and B&E. And when I was at Reno, I remember telling people like, "Oh, I'm going to be a winemaker," and they're like, "Shut the fuck up! Like that's not a job, you know." And I
You're
was
like,
like, "No, no,
actually,
no."
my dad
Yeah,
worked
so
at the Napa Truce, so like it is.
yeah, totally. And so yeah, so I was like studying geology at UNR, and I was like this obsessive rock climber. And I still like love rock climbing, but I realized pretty quickly like either I'm going to be a like be an academic or I'm going to work for Shell. And I've always worked in vineyards and loved that like annual cycle that you get with vineyards. And that it's why I love crafts. Like crafts all about obsession and cycles and doing the same thing over and over again and getting better and better and better at it and celebrating that. So yeah, so then I kind of like about halfway through my geology degree was like, I'm gonna focus on wine. And so I finished that up, but then I went and got my second back at Davis. But yeah, it's like my family always supported the idea of like being an artist and being an artist as a professional, which is a whole other thing, right? Like
Yep.
it's right. Like if you're going to be an artist and a professional, you have to like, understand that sales are a part of that and have a healthy relationship with it. And that can take a long time to develop, you know, and like sharing credit for your craft with the people who are funding it and all that stuff and they're just as important as we are, right? So like keeping your ego in check and realizing that I think is something that like having a mentor like my dad really helped. And I came with open eyes.
That's awesome. I think that's one thing that folks forget about with winemaking. And I'm not a winemaker, but I hear winemakers talk about the art side of it, right? And you can't negate that.
Mhm.
Like it really is an art. There's so much that goes into winemaking. I mean, totally, there's a lot of people that are just making mass produced wine where it's way more of a business.
Totally.
But when you find those folks that view it as art form, as a story, right?
Yeah.
Like you're really the custodian telling the story of a plot of land, of these
Totally.
grapes, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
difference when you taste that wine. Like
A
it's
hundred
it's
percent.
so noticeable. Yeah. And I have
I
to
think so
say,
too.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I think so too. I think it's one of those like one of the things that's hurt the industry more than anything is the lack of an ingredients label on wine, right? And the fact
Yeah.
that the FDA doesn't require it because it means that somebody and like I don't think anybody who's making a more modern manufactured wine like loves or hates wine more or less than we do. They just have a different relationship, but I think it's a real disservice to the consumer because consumers think everybody's making wine the way that we make it, and they're just not, right? They're using a lot of modern techniques to kind of like to attain flavors they want, right? And that's totally fine, right? And I don't have an issue with that. I have an issue with lack of transparency. Because
Mhm.
I think transparency is super important, and it's way harder to make a wine that's not using all these modern manufactured techniques and have it be stable and have it be expressive. But
Yeah.
it's also going to capture terroir in a much more like for me like just a much more interesting way. So it's that interesting balance. But we're never going to get ingredients label on alcohol like that only benefits the little guys. And so we'll put like we're actually working on starting to put some on our bottles like voluntarily.
Cool.
But yeah, it's one of those things like everybody who's got a lobbyist also makes like millions of cases and they're not going to fight for transparency in wine. That's
That's just the reality we're facing. You
that's
know what?
not how it is. Yeah.
That's where I love being able to make connections with winemakers like you and your dad and others that have a really strong commitment to what they're doing. And I think it's so important to
Mhm.
get these stories out. I mean, I love supporting winemakers that are so passionate about their craft and truly their craft and their art over just making money,
Mhm.
right? I think it was almost 2 years ago that I interviewed Tara Jane Albee from Own Root
Oh, I
Collective.
love TJ. That's my
So
super homie. I love her so much.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so she sent me a bottle of your Chardonnay, and I had never
Oh,
heard of you
yeah.
guys before. And I was like, but
Totally.
Tara Jean, I'm not a big Napa Chardonnay fan. She was like, no,
Well,
no, no, try this wine, Sarah. And I'm not
yeah.
kidding Sam, when I say it blew my mind. And I don't say that
I
often
love,
about wines that I hated, but
yeah,
like I was never a Napa Chardonnay girl. And I tasted
totally.
this wine, and my mind was truly blown because it was so different than anything I had tasted coming out of Napa before. And the quality was
Totally.
incredible. I mean, I was
Thank you so
truly
much.
blown away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it
Thank you.
really,
That's awesome.
your passion and what you guys are doing, it shows through. I mean, obviously you have
Yeah.
incredible expertise and experience, but it's obvious that you guys are staying true to really trying to make incredible wine with a sustainable
Yeah.
focus and a focus that's going to be true to the consumer, which I think is just fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's this thing like we've made wines for other people for a long time, and like I'm really lucky that in my day jobs, like I have kind of carved out a niche where I get to make wines that I like, and same with my father. But for the most part in this valley, like people don't really understand when you're in Napa, like not every Napa winemaker is drinking Napa wine every night, right? It's really like not we you're making a product that's mostly it's for how do you be nice about this? I just think stylistically, like they're not wines that they're a lot of them can be called what we call cocktail wines. Like they're really high in alcohol, they're really rich, they're really round, they kind of dominate food. And it's just not the relationship that we want to have with wine in our lives. I don't want it. I think trophies are stupid, right? Like I love utilitarian craft. And so like I think there's way more power in a wine that's a little cheaper but is made with that pure focus and can be part of your life the way that like when somebody has a coffee mug that they love and they use every day, like they're giving it the power, right? And it's not about best, it's not about scores, all that stuff's bullshit, right? It's like when you have the confidence in the craft to know that you're making the right decisions and not worry about the scores and the critics and all this stuff, I think it shows. And it's different than when everybody's just chasing these scores by getting these wines bigger and bigger and richer and richer. And like a lot of people love those big rich wines, right? And like
There's a market.
craft should also be hedonic. Like I'm not here to like start a war. Like, I don't begrudge anybody who's doing the craft and putting their money on the line, right? I think it's probably a much better business decision just to make big rich wines and try and get the scores. But we want to honor California. Like California, I grew up in Napa. I've watched this valley change like crazy, and there's this perception out there when you're in. I think you might echo this with your Chardonnay statement. Like when you're in serious wine drinking like circles, when you're talking to sommeliers at restaurants, when you're talking to people who are studying, like there is a perception that Napa wines are wines that are cocktail wines. They're not for food and they're kind of overblown, right? And that's human terroir, right? I think a lot about that, right? It's not what Napa wants to do. It's what's been branded really effectively. And so it's why like Complant's so important to my dad and I. It's like we've got something to say about the fact that you can make restrained wines that honor this place as opposed to these wines that only honor human beings with these huge egos.
I love
Not
that
that
you
we
just,
don't,
I love that you
not
just
that
use the
we don't
term.
have,
Go
go ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
Not that we don't have our own huge egos, but like, we also, uh,
Hey, no
uh,
judgment. I've got my
yeah.
own corner on pride too. I get it. I just love that you just use the term human terroir. I've never heard that before, but now I want to coin it. So I think it's so
Oh, for sure.
fabulous. Like
Oh,
it's
for
so true.
sure. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's so much
for
that we can
sure.
do to change the way a wine is expressed, and you don't get to taste the terroir of the region. And I love that you guys are so
Uh,
focused, really letting the land speak for itself. So, I mean, if you just had to summarize like how you guys are positioning yourselves as different from every other cab or Chardonnay and Napa, what makes yours so different?
yeah.
Lower alcohol
Well,
content, obviously sustainable
well,
focus, but what else?
Well, yeah. So finding vineyards that because not every vineyard can do what we want them to do, but we're finding these extremely high quality vineyards that can make these restrained wines. We're not doing anything magic to make them, and then we're not utilizing any of these more modern techniques. So traditionally in Napa and in most of the wine industry, I'd say like 99% of people who are making Cabernet are picking stuff at a potential alcohol of like 17 or 18 and then adding water to get to a potential alcohol of 14 or 15 or 16, right? And that water back, obviously, like that changes the flavors that the grapes want to have, right? And it also is super financially beneficial because you're turning water into wine, right? Like Napa has the most expensive water in the world. because
Yep.
it's $150 bottles of Cabernet, like, and so all these modern techniques, and then people are using all these modern techniques to get color and to get stability and yada yada yada, and we're making wine the way people think you make wine. I think that's the thing with the transparency. It's like ambient yeast, ambient malolactic. We pick the fruit, we'll add a little bit of sulfur, but otherwise, like, these wines are very minimally made. But I think, and that has to do with the relationship we want to have with the places, right? Like, we're making these wines in a way that shows respect for the place, but we're making them clean, right? Because I think the natural wine thing's a whole other thing that I don't want to I can't get into the conversation of natural wine. That's like three more podcasts, but
That's fair.
we're not.
Till the next episode.
Yeah, we're not making natty wine, right? We want to make these terroir driven, magnificent wines. And as my dad with his background at Petrus, and me with my background and Dominus, and me with my background like all over the world, we've traveled a lot and tasted with a lot of our favorite producers, DRC, Dujac, like these really, for me, Dovisat, like I love Chablis. Those people they're crafts people, right? They
Yeah.
obsess about the winemaking, but the other thing that I notice more and more is they just don't use a lot of these modern manufacturing techniques to kind of blow out the wines. They want to have that relationship. And so it's something that is just like really doesn't happen very much in Napa. And we just wanted to fight for this valley that's given us so much to be able to express itself in a way that I think, like, that our community will respect and not just think of as these like kind of like really expensive wines that are all about ego and not about actually like the beauty of wine, which is a wine that enhances your meal and shows a place that you can connect with. And it's like it's the way that Napa was when my dad's been here for 50 years, right? It's like, and it's what he remembers, right? We're making these wines that people just want to drink. They just work. Like, you find super dope vineyards, you don't mess with them that much, pay them respect. Like, it's not a crazy concept, but it's fewer and fewer. So, like a Chardonnay, I think Chardonnay is an amazing grape that's been branded so poorly because of the human terroir,
Yeah.
because people think you need to make these like really buttery, oaky, which does so much of masking terroir. And I want to champion Napa. Napa's so cool. The biologic, like, or the geologic diversity in Napa is insane. And so,
Yeah.
like, helping to let that express itself is just like a no-brainer for
And
me and for my dad.
I think when you take a grape like Chardonnay, right, that is so
Hmm.
important when we talk about just the history of wine in general, you know,
Totally.
you give it such a, I'm going to say, polarizing outlook because
Hmm.
of human terroir, we'll call it. I like your term.
Yeah. Thank
It
you.
can really, it can damage the reputation of the grape around the globe. And then it can also make
Big
folks
time.
not excited about that region because that region becomes known for that style of wine, right?
Uh,
And I think that
yeah.
it can have a damaging impact, definitely. And I think that's what we've
Hmm.
seen with Chardonnay. So I love that you guys are setting out to,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
I
totally agree too. Yeah.
I love that you just gave that eloquent, coherent answer while making this beautiful piece of pottery that I can't get over. I'm so impressed that you're like doing both at the same time. I'm so impressed right now. And it looks beautiful. You're gonna have to show us this at the end.
Okay.
Okay, so I
Oh
have
my
to
God.
ask, tell us about the name. Where did Complant come from?
Yeah.
It's such a unique word. What's like the history behind that and how you and your dad actually decided at the beginning to like come together and open your own winery?
Yeah, I think so. It was so Complant is it's kind of like it's an old word that has been it's an old French word. My dad speaks fluent French. I used to speak French when I lived there. I no longer do. But my dad goes back to Bordeaux all the time. He has all his mentors and friends and has a huge connection with France, and that connection has influenced my philosophies about wine as well in a big way. And the other place you'll see Complant is Agripar. You know the Agripar champagne? It's one of my favorite champagnes.
Yeah.
Agarp. So Agripar's tete de cuvee is called the Complanté. And so Complant is like an obsolete French word that, so it's like, it was from, it's in this book on Le Théâtre d'Agriculture. It's like this, one of the first books ever written about agriculture and talking about wine. He says, l'air, la terre, les terroirs sont l'air, la terre, les complants sont le fondement de le vignoble. And so the air, the earth, and the complant. And complant is, it means the cultivated vine. So it encapsulates this thing that I think is really important. It encapsulates the human terroir just in the statement, right? There's no cultivated vine without the human, but there's no wine without the vine. And so it really kind of encapsulated our philosophy. Of course, we're obviously not marketers because like nobody can say the word. Doesn't really make sense to most people. Nobody will recognize it. But you know, like we want to do our brand our way, and we want to represent our love for the wines the way, you know, in our relationship. And we just thought it really encapsulated our relationship with vines and wines in a really special way.
No, I love that. That's amazing. Okay, so you and your dad decide to start this winery together. Has it been
Mhm.
hard working with your dad? I know family businesses can be challenging at times.
No, it's been lovely. It's been really cool. I mean, you know, like 10 years ago it would have been impossible, right? But like what I've realized, my dad's 73, and he's probably got, 10, 15 vintages left, hopefully 20. But like he's a really amazing craftsman. Like I learn from him every day. And like being able to, and then like, and I think everybody knows who's a working professional, you talk to the people you work with a lot, like more than the people you don't work with. And so it's also just like this magnificent opportunity for my dad and I just to chat on a daily basis. And like, some of those conversations are about wine and our business, but that's always free flowing because we're both like kind of ADD and obsessive and have all this other like art stuff going. So like it's been lovely and I really respect him. And the other thing is there's stuff that I'm good at, there's stuff that he's good at. We have good healthy communication. I've gone to a lot of therapy. He's gone to
Okay.
like
Now we're
we
getting
have
down to it. That's where we come to it. Lots of therapy.
yeah, yeah, you have to like, like we have healthy communication. So like there can be friction, and I think friction is part of any business or real relationship, but like when there is, it's not like, nobody's punching below the belt.
Yeah. That's good.
It's
That's important.
yeah. So yeah, it's like it's been amazing, and the amount that I learned from him on a daily basis, and vice versa, right? Like it's kind of like he is one of the masters of Cabernet and Napa, and then I am a schmuck who makes Chardonnay, but like, you know, but I've obsessed about Chardonnay for quite a while, and so like, my dad would tell you, and it'd be true, and then I tell you as well. Like we learn from each other all the time, and
Sure.
like, and even though like one of us is, I think like with craft, like if you have too many voices in the room, the craft can get dulled down, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he's gonna hold the keys on the cab, and I'm gonna hold the keys on the shard, but then every decision's really made together,
I
right?
love it.
But his decision will trump mine with the cab, as it should, right? It's kind of his wine, and I trust his prestige. Whereas I've worked a lot with Chardonnay, and I traveled around Chablis and tasted with the greatest Chablis producers and made my own, so it's like there's that mutual respect, and then I just get to spend a bunch of time with my dad. It's fucking sweet.
I love it. No, it's so
Yeah.
awesome. I'm so glad. It sounds like an amazing opportunity to get to make wine together. So you picked
Mhm.
Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay. And is
Yeah.
that where your portfolio is going to end? Has there been discussion of maybe expanding?
Well, it's really interesting. So, we talked about, because I mean, I was at this place, Kibblestat Cellars. I'm now at Ashes and Diamonds. Like, I've worked with tons of varietals, right? I've been at these places where I got to play with Carignan and Zinfandel, but doing Zinfandel carbonic. So I was picking my Zinfandel really light and making these like quaffable wines and Rhone varietals, Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, um, Ribolla, Giallo. Like I was making all these hipster varietals,
Yeah,
and great varietals, right? But varietals off the beaten path is a nicer way than saying hipster varietals because they're just as serious, they're just different.
sure.
Um, but like, but I think there is something that's really important about Cabernet and Chardonnay is like if you want to make a real statement that people can understand, like you need to use the grapes they understand. You wouldn't taste for a lot of people who don't know what Caraconte is, like if I'm making a really delicious racy Caraconte, nobody's gonna be like, holy shit, Caraconte can do this. But
Yeah,
but when you do with Cabernet and Chardonnay and you champion these varietals that are some of the greatest, they're also like two of the greatest varietals in the world. There's a reason why they've come to such prominence, right?
yeah,
And so you champion these varietals that people can understand and make a statement that way and make beautiful wines from two of the greatest grapes. Like Cabernet is Cabernet for a reason. It's a badass grape,
yeah,
right? And I think Chardonnay, like Chablis is Chablis and white Burgundy is white Burgundy for a reason. That Chardonnay can do it,
yeah.
right? It's just and so like championing that style, I think is just like super fun and it's an important statement so people understand that there's room in this world for great Chardonnay. And I really try to be careful about not being like Napa Chardonnay shit. I think there's a lot of beautiful Napa Chardonnay that isn't made by me, right? Like and
Sure.
everybody should have their own opinions. But I think that we have a statement to say that can be very different to we have a style that's very different to what people are accustomed to, but is delicious and
Hmm.
really works with food and will stand the test of time. Like those wines will age really well. So it's one of those like, you always try and keep your ego in check as much as you can, even though it's impossible. But I think we have something to say, and that's why Cabernet and Chardonnay make so much sense. And like the other thing to think about is we're not millionaires. It's you got to be really rich to start a winery here, and the marketing that goes in, like we are makers. We're really good at like that's our focus is making great wines. And if if we find a way to sell out a bunch of wine and there's demand, like we can play. Like let's go. We'll make some fun wines. But we don't want to get over our skis. We want to focus on the statement that we're making. And hopefully that statement, is supported. And we can kind of like we can shake the industry up a little bit by showcasing these great grapes and this great style that more and more people, I think, as people are drinking more wines of the world and it's a more like widely connected winemaking world, people want wines like ours. People
Yeah.
know like that there's power in restraint and that it's not just about the biggest wine. And so hopefully like we'll have enough support that we'll be making all kinds of different stuff. But right now the plan is just to stick with Chardonnay and Cabernet and do the thing there. And like make the best Chardonnay and Cabernet that we can and really get to know these vineyards too. Because we've only been doing this project for 7 years or since 2017, 6 years.
Okay.
And it takes a long time to really learn to know a vineyard and know what it wants and what it can do. And like we're still developing those relationships. So bringing another relationship into the mix could be a lot right now. We're kind of trying to focus on just really mastering these vineyards and like helping them express themselves in interesting ways.
So do you guys buy any grapes or do you own all the
We buy all our grapes. So we work with Steve Mathiasen, who's my ultra homie. Steve's the best. What's up, Steve? Steve is kind of Steve's a big time mentor for me. And he is one of the foremost knowledges on organic farming in Napa and has kind of really shaken up the industry. He makes his own wine, amazing wines at Matthias and Wines. If anybody who's listening who hasn't checked out Steve's wines, they are the dopest. He's the best. So Steve farms the Linda Vista Vineyard and leases it. And so, he's one of the greatest farmers that I know in the valley. I trust him. And we would love to farm our own vineyards. Both of us have farmed a lot and have a lot of opinions about farming, but small businesses like, the beauty of what we have is we have the tribal knowledge, the communal knowledge to know some of the best farmers, some of these people to get into these vineyards at these really small scales that a lot of other people wouldn't be able to get into.
Sure.
And so that's kind of what's lovely about having, 60 years of industry experience between my dad and I. It's not just, what you know, but it's who you know. And so like pretty cool. Steve doesn't peel off a bunch of that vineyard for a bunch of other people, but he's been amazing and supportive. And like, we're really lucky because it's an amazing Chardonnay vineyard. It's one of the oldest Chardonnay vineyards in Napa. And I love old vines. Old vines have power. So
That's awesome. You got to have good grapes to make great wine, right? So that's
hell yeah.
awesome.
Mhm.
So do you consider yourselves like a micro winery? How many bottles or cases are you guys producing every year?
Yeah, we make about 400 cases a year. So yeah, we're tiny. I mean, tiny, tiny, tiny. For like, Nickel and Nickel makes 50,000 cases a year. We make 500. Like we're a tiny winery, right? And that's because it's expensive to make a lot of wine. When you're working with great vineyards like we are, it can be, it can just kill a business to try and scale up. And like we're not the goal for us isn't to get rich. We don't the goal for us is to like make beautiful wines and make a statement and hope that people enjoy them. So, it's like it's neither of our full-time jobs. And like you can't throw clay and mushroom forage and like my dad's like scuba diving and sailing and like you can't do all that. We're not entrepreneurs. That's not what I'm interested in. And I like no nothing against entrepreneurs. I think they're awesome and a lot of them are some of our greatest supporters. Like it's just I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. I've built businesses for them. It's a lifestyle that's crazy and I don't want to live sales. I want to live creation. And so like being able to have a winery at that scale and really focus on the craft and the product and a little bit of the sales as opposed to just being kind of like so driven by scaling and growing and selling is just that's the relationship my dad and I want to have with the brand.
No, that's awesome. I love that. So then if folks wanted to be able to try your wines,
Yeah,
what's the best way to find them? Because obviously it's smaller production. I
totally.
mentioned Jane earlier from Own Root Collective, which I'll link in the show
Yeah,
notes. I know you work with her, but
yeah.
where else? Yeah.
Sorry, splash. So yeah, hit up TJ. She's the best. And then you can buy all our wines online. Our website's complantwine.com. We host tastings actually here in at the house. I don't know. We can maybe have a friendly come. And then we also host tastings at the winery. So yeah, you can get us at you can find me an email. Subscribe to the newsletter, hit us in all the grams and chats and stuff. Um, but if you support us via the website, we're at a bunch of restaurants. We have distribution all over, but the best way to support us is just to order straight from us. And please fire us an email if you're interested. We love to touch people and talk about craft. And it doesn't just have to be wine and a bunch of boring stuff. If you want to talk about art and music and whatever, let's go. Film.
I love it. Sam, this has been like one of my favorite episodes ever. I just love your
Oh,
cool. You're like, yeah, let's just talk wine, art, whatever. I love it. Well, you're bringing your whole self. I love it. It's amazing.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
okay,
thank you
last
so much.
question.
It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything super exciting coming on the horizon for you this year as we go into the new year? What are you looking forward to in 2024? It could be Complant, it could be pottery, it could be foraging for mushrooms with
Yeah.
dogs.
Well, so like I just like for my dad and I mean, we've started working with we're really focused on getting the word out and having people like we really want people to know about what we're doing. And we've been making some changes, like we've been obsessed about the craft for the first 5 years of the business. And it's time for us to get our story out. And so that's one of the big things is like just really kind of just really getting the word out so that we can start talking and touching more people. And like, wine sales are great and wine sales are important, but it's just like we think we have an interesting story and a story that people will really connect to, and we want more people to have access to it. So that's our big goal for 2024. And then, I guarantee my dad will tell you he's like, we've got a concert series. Anybody like, so my dad hosts a bunch of backyard concerts in the backyard that we sponsor, Complant Wine. So if you're ever down in Napa or close, like the concert series is dope. So my dad's gearing up for like a couple New Orleans bands, and I'm sure he's stoked on. And then we'll do a bunch of we've got a lobster trip coming up. We do a bunch of scuba diving for lobster out on Santa Cruz Island, so that'll be good too. So just keep it moving. But yeah, it's hopefully more and more people are just kind of like connecting to the wine, so that they can get some different perspective.
That's
Sarah,
awesome.
this has been so much
Yeah.
fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is awesome. No, I love your mission and what you're trying to do in Napa and love your wines truly. And so excited to
Cool.
include everything you mentioned, all the links in the show notes so everyone can check out your amazing winery and learn more about Complant and follow your adventures as well. So thank you so
Hell
much.
yeah. Yeah, cheers. Bye guys. Take care.
All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Sam. I had such a fun time chatting with him. I learned a lot about his mission and what he and his dad are doing with Complant Wine, but just had such a fun time chatting with him. It's amazing to support small businesses like this. And let me tell you, their wines are phenomenal, truly outstanding wines. I was really impressed with what they're doing. And you can check out their website and be able to order their wines to be shipped direct to your house. You can also contact them if you're visiting Napa and you want to visit their winery and try some of their wines in person as well. Remember that they're a micro winery, so they are a smaller business. You're not going to be able to find their wines in a lot of stores and not even through most online retailers. So you do have to go direct to their website to be able to contact them to try some of their wines. And let me tell you, you will not be disappointed. They are phenomenal. If you learned something new from today's episode, don't forget to like and share it with a friend. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so now so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes of the Wine CEO podcast. Until next week, friends, I hope you drink something new and delicious, and I will catch you in the next episode of the Wine CEO podcast.